Oh wow, I am so excited for a new Dawn of World of Warcraft cross-faction play.
Me too.
Tally, you might want to check your title.
Oh right, good one, yeah. We want to make our new Horde allies feel welcome and at home.
Here they come now.
Well, I don't know, Evie. They seem a bit rough looking. Are you sure this is going to work out?
Only one way to find out. To a dungeon. Hero! Hero! Please! Hero!
Lost!
You watch your mouth around my wife, dude. These Horde guys are very horny, Evitel, which is great, obviously, but also, very inappropriate. I don't know if this is gonna work out.
If only there was something we could all really bond over. Like something we could all share.
Man, this healer really sucks, right?
Oh boy, yeah, tell me about it.
Totally, the absolute worst.
Hang on, I'm the healer.
Oh yeah, he sucks.
You did it, Tally. You brought Horde and Alliance together in friendship and understanding at last.
Could we kick him?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Knowledge is power.
Hello Internet and welcome to a very special episode of the Weekly Reset. Taliesin and Evitel's wondrous wisdom show, because it is the episode for the week that World of Warcraft changes forever with the introduction of cross-faction play. Horde and Alliance playing together, mass hysteria. Hello everyone, it's Taliesin from the future here, or I guess the present? Slightly older and more tired Taliesin anyway. Much more tired. Now, we specifically held off releasing this episode of the Reset until the actual in-game reset because we just had a sneaky suspicion that there was going to be some secret unannounced stuff in there, as you'll know if you've been following this show. And we are very glad that we did, because the mad lads only went and did it, fam! As well as everything we were expecting, 9.25 also has a ton of very important surprises in it, including 3 new story chapters and in-game cutscenes, and new Dark Ranger customizations for Blood, Void, and Night Elves upon completing the new Return to Lordaeron questline. And the fact that Blizz kept this under wraps right up until the launch is genuinely brilliant, and I just want you to rest assured that we will be talking about all of that, or rather, I, future, present, tired Taliesin will be talking about it. Don't worry, this is the good shit. Oh, and also, not that it's important at all, but you know, Taliesin was right. That's not important, but it is true. Okay, see you in a bit. Enjoy Innocent Unknowing past me for a minute. And cross-faction play is a part, of course, of the new patch 9.2.5, which is out now as you watch this. The patch that managed to be simultaneously a little bit overdue and also surprisingly soon, with its release announced just days before it hit the live servers. With this accompanying art, which I guess is referencing cross-faction stuff. It's like a orc and a human, and they're like next to each other and not all angry with each other, but it's also definitely the first time that Blizz have used a trinket as the main focus of their new patch art, which is lovely. And obviously we are going to be taking you through quickly and efficiently everything that is and isn't in this patch, and do our usual thing of, you know, if you're someone that has kind of fallen off the WoW train a little, and let's face it, falling off probably wouldn't have hurt much since it's been a very slow moving train of late, and let's be real, why shouldn't you come back for 9.25? Well, I'm glad you are. Don't come back for 9.2.5 if you are expecting Season 4. This is not the much hyped and vaunted new tier of gear with vendors for deterministic gearing, nor the bright new world of each raid of Shadowlands being current again in the rotation, nor the whole new roster of classic, as in, you know, that's a classic, rather than World of Warcraft or Burning Crusade or Wrath classic. Although, with the way things have been going with those, it genuinely wouldn't surprise me too much if they added Mythic Plus to a Season of Mastery or something, and that would be a good thing. Maybe. There's no new PvP season. All of that is to come further down the line, almost certainly at some point in August, we think. Don't come back to 9.25 if you want cross-realm guilds. Mr. GM, who has done loads of good work on testing this stuff, managed to start one on the PTR, but we think that has now been fixed for some reason, because having guilds would be awesome, obviously, but it's not on Blizzard's grand plan at the moment, and we just have to live with that. It's not a thing. Don't come back to 925 if you're very offended at the thought of signing a social contract on logging in for the first time, reminding you of shit that's in the terms of service, like no harassment, no hate speech, no spamming or advertising, and being encouraged to, just generally be nice and supportive to other players without being a dick, because such a social contract exists, and you will need to sign it before being allowed to play. Obviously, when I bring up people complaining about this, it's complete hypothetical though, because no one is actually going to object to that. And so ends World of Warcraft. No, it was a shit show, obviously. Good fishing god, I'm glad I haven't tossed any cash down this particular furnace in the last couple of years. Yet another nail in the coffin. Jafaka never encountered as many sensitive snowflakes as I have in WoW. Soft-ass snowflake culture. Woke craft. Yeah, some people are upset about it. And look, I don't want to misrepresent anyone here. And in fairness, players who oppose this, or rather don't outright praise it, do tend to fall into three distinct groups. The people who you just know you wouldn't ever want to play the game with in the first place. We've seen some of them here. But also people who are afraid that this new contract, combined with the new more thorough reporting tools coming in 925, will result in at best no change at all, and at worst fake mass reporting by trolls to get perfectly innocent players banned. Something that obviously can happen right now. And whereas I don't think a new hypothetical invasion of Jesse Smollett's wrongly reporting good, honest, salt-of-the-earth players for racism or general meanness, where actually they did nothing wrong, is an especially good reason not to encourage better behavior or make it easier to report bad behavior. It is true that at the end of the day, Blizz can have all the systems in place that they like. They can have as many standards of behavior as they like. If they don't hire more staff to deal with issues when they arise, rather than rely on an automated system, it is true not much is going to change. And the thing is, they're not going to hire more GMs for this, are they? I know that, you know that. We'll have to wait and see how the new report tools pan out, but my hopes aren't high anything's really going to change. But that's certainly not a negative about the contract itself. Likewise, the third concern, which is that toxic game inspires toxic behavior. Who could imagine? They are shifting blame from their toxic workplace to the player base. They get to blame us, virtue signal, and divide us all at the same time. The idea that this is just a distraction for the fact that Blizzard have cultivated toxicity in their player base from the very start. And honestly, there may be some truth in that. Whereas I think most of the Horde and Alliance animosity that comes along with WoW stuff is basically just playful to the point of being tongue-in-cheek most of the time, there is no doubt a significant portion of the player base do take it far too seriously, and Blizzard probably hasn't done enough to contain that traditionally. The most obvious example would be Blizz cheerfully screening that Cannibal Corpse guy at BlizzCon, throwing out homophobic slurs at Alliance players and really meaning it. That tongue is not in his cheek. That guy's cheek was tongue-free, and you'd be surprised at how many people at the time said that wasn't offensive, or that people should toughen up and get thicker skins if they want to play online. The dismissal of indefensible behavior that I'm sure no one would ever resort to today. So I think there is a kernel of truth in this criticism, and yet I always feel that kind of does a disservice to the vast majority of players who aren't complete dickheads, Despite any encouragement of friction between the factions and players, I and all my friends and guildies generally manage not to be toxic to people in game. Nearly all of the time. I hardly ever throw out the N-word or homophobic slurs these days, I manage not to do a hate speech or harassment or anything else. So if Blizzard really are fostering those things among its players, they're really not fostering hard enough to encourage anyone who isn't already toxic to be complete douches and act in those ways. And to get back to the topic, it's hard to see how this social contract could possibly make that behavior worse. There's basically zero downsides to this as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, don't come back for 925 if you disagree with that. Seriously. Please don't come back. And why should you come back? Well, if any of the things that will be a part of 925 appeal to you, of course. Oh, it's time for a 925 super quick roundup. Yes, I, future present Taliesin, am back. Yes, the main headline of the patch was going to be cross-faction play, and old me, younger me, is still going to cover all of that, but that headline has changed when the patch launched, and the possibility that we had considered and speculated upon, but dared not truly hope for, came to pass. And yes, there was a reason Blizz were keeping the 9.25 splash screen encrypted on the PTR, and yes, that reason was not only 3 new in-game cutscenes, not only a new questline dealing with the Forsaken and their move back into Lordaeron, but yes, the unlocking of new Dark Ranger customizations for Blood Elves, Void Elves, and Night Elves as well. This pallid skin and red eye option is such a 9-carat grade A gold-plated crowd-pleasing win that it's actually incredibly impressive that Blizz kept it under wraps and secret until the patch was live. This is a major feature of the patch, arguably a bigger selling point to many people than the cross-faction stuff, and Blizz just didn't mention it. And that element of surprise is so unusual for this game and the way that it is usually put together that it genuinely seems like another major landmark and yeah, new dawn in of itself, because if not spoiling its big story moments on the PTR were to become the new norm, then the way loads of us experience and consume this game will change dramatically and for the better. Like, normally, Return to Lordaeron and Dark Ranger customizations would have been on the PTR months ago. They would have been talked about on Wowhead and forums, and this show, you'd have heard all the main plot beats secondhand, or watched a video of the questline with no voice dialogue, or maybe you'd have just watched a rougher, unvoiced version of the cutscene with a big red X through it. Instead, the first you've heard about this new storyline and Dark Ranger stuff was on the day that it launched, which means you didn't have to read about it. You didn't have to engage in weeks-long Twitter conversations about it before you saw it with your own eyes. You could just log on and play it straight away. It means everyone's first experience of the quests is just that much more positive and engaged. And yes, it helps that the questline itself is an absolute banger too, for sure, but more than that, it's just the correct way to be experiencing it, and I really hope it's a philosophy that Blizz carries through in the future. I feel like there was genuinely more hype this way than having it on the PTR personally. The Lordaeron questline has you, whether as a Horde or disguised Alliance character, helping Calia Menethil in gathering various important Forsaken folks and helping them cleanse the blight from overground Lordaeron, giving the Forsaken, including it would seem many of the raised Night Elf Rangers from Darkshore, a foothold in a new home and rewarding players with those Dark Ranger customizations, a new skin tone and red eye combo, which is available to all Blood Elves, Void Elves, and Night Elves, regardless of class, just like Night Warrior customizations in BFA. And if you complete the quest on a Hunter, then you'll get the BFA Dark Ranger Transmog set, wearable exclusively by Hunters of any race. And the quest itself is full of good character moments and dialogue, and it's fun to see most of the Forsaken leaders be as flat out distrustful of Calia as most of the Horde player base seem to be. She takes a role as part of the new Desolate Council at the end of the story, and that will be a huge relief for players who were worried she was being primed to end up as High Lightforged Queen of the Forsaken, even though literally any time we've ever talked to her in the past 6 years, she's made a point of saying she has no interest in being a leader. There's a really cool cutscene in this quest too, between Calia and Lilian Voss in the throne room of Lordaeron, which obviously has very special significance to Calia. Also really interesting in this, one of the ambient sound effects associated with the throne room, the ghosts of Lordaeron, the chatter and the screams, the echoes of its violent past in Warcraft 3 have disappeared, almost like the ghosts have been put to rest. The models and the animations in it are absolutely incredible, and best of all, it's only one of 3 cutscenes in this patch. The others are a scene showing a conversation between Anduin and Sylvanas in the moor, and there's also Tyrande being given the new Tear of Elune, infused, willingly it's important to say, by the souls of rescued Teldrassil Night Elves, which itself is clearly being primed as becoming a new home for the Night Elves a bit further down the road. My money from the conversation that goes on in this scene would be that it's going to be planted in the Dragon Isles at some point and turned into, I don't know, a new world tree or elf tree or whatever it is grows from a Tear of Elune. The Night Elves giving their souls to aid in the rebirth of Night Elf society is a nice contrast to the event that this will doubtless remind you of, the Wisps sacrificing themselves to kill Archimonde in Warcraft 3. This scenario, by contrast, is a much more hopeful one and reinforces the themes of Tyrande's Shadowlands arc of choosing renewal over destruction. We clearly hear a heartbeat when she rests her head on the seed too, which suggests that those souls aren't sacrificed exactly, and I wouldn't be surprised to see their souls eventually inhabiting the new Night Elves' home when it is established. It's a really good cutscene. There's a hint towards Ysera returning to Azeroth at some point. I like it, but I don't like it as much as I like Anduin's visit to Sylvanas in the Moor, where we see her literally looting a soul by hand. Yeah, this whole freeing all the souls thing is going to take a while. Before we get what is a really satisfying payoff to the real main story of Shadowlands, the relationship between these two mortal enemies. Anduin is clearly still incredibly affected by his experience in being dominated by the jailer. Not just the loss of control and the bad things that he did, but the fear that he might have actually enjoyed doing those things on some level. And honestly, it's really good to see the Golden Boy having a residual trauma that is clearly going to take some time to truly deal with, rather than, the return to business as normal that I think most of us would have expected. Seeing Anduin's anxiety shift from a worry that he won't be able to live up to his father's legacy into much darker doubts that he is even a good person has lots of potential to be really interesting, I think. In all three cases, the animation and the detail of the models in these cutscenes is, for WoW, genuinely pretty staggering. I mean, have you seen these eyelashes? Seriously, just look at these eyelashes. And if this is a new dawn in terms of cutscenes and story delivery, then yes, I am totally here for it. There's even a cool little Easter egg with Venari in the Creation Catalyst, which has an extra option if you're an engineer, like, you're actually playing a roleplay game or something, which sets her up for some very, very interesting story later on as well. If you're confused, I'd suggest going back and rereading Firim's journal. So all these little story chapters and the new customizations are really enjoyable and worthwhile anyway, on their own terms, in my opinion. But the fact that they were kept secret, the fact that players were able to enjoy fresh without being spoiled months in advance is a delight, and a dub so big that I'm going to have to put it in the archives, because seriously, I've got to take my hat off to Blizz on this one. Credit where it's due. Well played. Keep it up. And when you think about it, the last 3 patches of this game now, from 9.15 onwards, have been legitimate breaths of fresh air in terms of game design philosophy and story delivery, and it bodes very well for the future, in my opinion. And look, are you impressed? I got to the end of this segment and I haven't even gloated once about how right I was that Dark Rangers were becoming a thing, and the fact that Blizz were hiding something big on the PTR. Okay, maybe just a little gloat. Tally was right. Tally was right. And we haven't even got onto the stuff that we knew was coming yet. I think back to younger old me for that. 925 super quick roundup. Blood Elf and Dark Iron Dwarf Heritage Armor quest lines. Yes, brand new armor, and at the time of writing, we are like 99% sure mounts will be available to Blood Elf and Dark Iron Dwarves who have already completed their race's existing Heritage Armor quest lines, which for Dark Iron means you've leveled a character to max level from scratch, by the way. And in each case will reward an armor recolor, which is especially cool for the Blood Knight wannabes. No spoilers for the quests themselves, but they are pretty interesting from a lore perspective, especially on the Blood Elf side, which teams you up with a cool, new but not new character and gives some insight into the Scourge situation since the Helm of Domination was broken at the beginning of Shadowlands. All Wings of Torghast will now be permanently open rather than being on a rotation, and completing a Torghast wing now guarantees a renown reward, as does completing dungeons and raid bosses. There is a whole new level 60 renown skip, which is purchasable so alts can start straight at that level, and all Covenant Sanctum achievements are now account wide. There's a huge 400% increase to legendary crafting XP, which should mean more players are able to craft legendaries. I kind of think if you had interest in being a legendary crafter and not just spunking gold and or real life money on WoW tokens to buy the base items on the auction house, you'd have probably done it by now. But yeah, clearly a good change. There's a new PvP arena, which used to have a bunch of columns that could go up and down and activated by players interacting with a console in the center, but which now just doesn't. It's just a new arena now. There is even a new high-resolution cursor. An armored hand that points at stuff is now crisp AF and sharper than Evitel after I've said something stupid, which makes it look really great, obviously, especially when compared to every other cursor icon in the game, like when you go hover over a mailbox, or a shopkeeper, or an innkeeper, or repairs, which still use scummy low-res images, which are now extra noticeable, like when you're bored at home and you decide on a whim to watch Land Before Time now, and you're like, how did anyone ever think this picture quality was okay for like an actual real life movie? Obviously it's only a matter of time before all those other icons are upscaled too. One might even say that the hand is just a precursor of what is to come. I'm gonna leave a little gap here to talk about anything we didn't know or weren't sure about right here. Specifically, any surprises regarding quests and the story. Ooh, this is exciting. What's it gonna be? Oh no, we've already done my bit, carry on. And then of course there is what was going to be the whole headline of the entire patch, cross-faction play. Something that really is a seminal, groundbreaking moment in the game. And a change which means, I honestly don't think it's exaggerating to say, nothing will ever be the same again. Because starting in 9.2.5, players will be able to team up with characters from the opposing faction for pre-made raid, dungeon, and at the moment on the PTR, Torghast and world quests. We'll have to wait and see if those make it live, because this was originally billed by Blizz as basically an instance thing. Players will be able to invite each other into groups cross-faction directly if they are in-game or Battle.net friends. Cross-faction communities can be created in-game, and existing communities can now become cross-faction with just the click of a toggle. Pug groups on the group finder can be opened to cross-faction by their leader, but automatic queues like LFR and island expeditions will not be cross-faction. This is very much an opt-in feature. Also, some instances that are built differently for Horde and Alliance, like Battle of Dazara Law, aren't able to accommodate cross-faction groups, and obviously guilds aren't a thing yet for some unknown reason. Otherwise, this represents a huge fundamental shift in how most people will play the game. Not just practically, but philosophically and themically, which is almost as important, because this is a game and a franchise built around the concept of a faction conflict. From the very start, it has been two sides vying for supremacy over the other, players fighting each other in the open world, faction pride and shifting power dynamics. The factions have more often than not ended up working together in some capacity to combat the greater threat, but that animosity and unease between the two was always there, cemented by an inability to play or even largely communicate with members of the other team. By modern standards, it's a bold, almost reckless move to cut half of your player base off from the other completely, and one which worked just fine back when there were 10 million people playing the game, but which has become more and more frustrating and old-fashioned feeling, especially when Battle for Azeroth's story seemed to be explicitly setting up an end to the faction conflict as a part of its narrative. It's frankly absolutely baffling that this change wasn't introduced as a climax of that narrative, with Jaina and Thrall and Anduin and Sourfang and Bane, yes, Bane actually genuinely doing stuff like getting captured, okay, and the rest of the Planeteers literally organizing a Horde and Alliance resistance force and constantly talking about breaking the cycle of hatred. Should have happened in BFA. There's also the glaring faction imbalance, which was never really such a big deal up until Warlords of Draenor, when Alliance were generally considered the best choice for PvP because of every man for himself essentially being an extra CC break trinket, and Horde being the best for raid because of some very beneficial racials of their own. But when everyone's favourite time-travelling expansion neutralised that human racial in PvP, there was basically no good gameplay reason why any serious player shouldn't pick Horde, and we're now at the stage where it is generally accepted if you want to engage in WoW's multiplayer endgame at all, you're just making it needlessly difficult on yourself if you don't pick the faction where all the endgame instance players are. And thus it snowballs, so that relatively the Alliance is now emptier than Kevin Spacey's work calendar. Like in 9.25, cross-realm mythic raiding is opening up for Sepulchre of the First Ones, even though the Alliance is nowhere near filling their 100 Hall of Fame places, which is supposed to be a requirement. It's just not happening. So from a gameplay point of view, you, this change is much needed, and the difference in the way people engage with the game will be instant. For one, obviously, it gives a whole new freedom to loads of players who play Horde now because it's the only way to game with their friends or get regular groups, who will finally be able to play the faction and race of their actual choice. And, you know, choice is a cool thing. For me, it actually works the other way round. My guild is Alliance, and I know loads of our members will relish being able to bring Horde characters along to raid and dungeons. Half my max level characters are Horde, and I can't wait to actually play my awesome Nightborn Mage, or Blood Elf Demon Hunter, or Forsaken Warlock, or Forsaken Rogue, or Forsaken Hunter. Look, I really like Forsaken, okay? With my friends rather than randoms. And as a streamer, it is absolutely amazing because it more than doubles the amount of viewers who are able to join me for groups, and means me getting carried to Keystone Master every season is going to be that little bit easier. And also, and this is probably the most important bit, it just feels good. Look, I proudly rock my Horde Slayer title on my Alliance main and my Alliance Slayer title on my Horde main. I'm a firm believer that War Mode is one of the coolest features ever added to the game. On stream, we've been testing cross-faction communities and grouping while we test Season 4 Mythic Plus dungeons. Side note, but Grimrail Depot is an absolute banger of a Mythic Plus dungeon. People are saying it's going to be a nightmare, and in some ways it definitely is, but also, it's really short, it's very intense, there's no dicking around with skips or alternative routes, one straight line, big pulls, crazy deeps. This is going to be one of the favourites of the season, mark my words. And it's just felt awesome to be pulling in players from both factions to game with. Like I said earlier, I don't think normal people ever took the faction divide genuinely seriously in terms of like identity and how you treat other people, but I think it did undoubtedly give toxic players more excuse to be toxic to others. And I think in lots of ways, this change will help soothe lots of those issues too. It genuinely feels like a new dawn and way of playing. I admit I am genuinely excited for Season 4 to hit when we get to see all of this working in a competitive environment, as well as communities maybe leveling together cross-faction in Dragonflight, and the next obvious step of making cross-faction guilds a thing. They've got to be a thing, right? Make them a thing. Welcome, my Horde and Alliance brethren, to the first day of the rest of your lives. Stop fighting. Thanks for joining us today. If you like this episode, don't thank us, thank our patrons who give their actual real-life money to make all of our work happen. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is George Fisher. No, God, no. My name is Taliesin from me and Evitel, and the Nyrin and Penny too. Until next time, cheerio.